This section describes the Japanese village. Until just 100 years ago, more than 90% of human life was lived through agriculture. In other words, a village where agriculture is practiced is all that people have. In the previous issue, we explained the process of establishment of the Edo period. Starting from this issue, I will explain the history of farming villages and towns during the Edo period. First, I will explain the establishment of the Edo period. Edo, now Tokyo, used to be nothing more than a small village. It was Hideyoshi Toyotomi's order to Ieyasu Tokugawa to move to this land that led to the great opening of Edo. Hideyoshi, who had unified the whole country, wondered how to treat the revered Ieyasu. Hideyoshi would then give Ieyasu the lands of the Hojo clan that he had destroyed. Moreover, Hideyoshi designated Edo as the land where Ieyasu would live. He told Ieyasu to quit using Odawara, with its solid castle built by the Hojo clan, or Kamakura, built by Gen Yoritomo, as Ieyasu's base. At that time, Edo was a small village in a low marshy area, overgrown with reeds. There were two reasons why Hideyoshi gave Ieyasu the Kanto region. One was to discourage the Tohoku lords who might oppose Hideyoshi. The other was to give Ieyasu control of the Kanto region, the former domain of the Hojo clan, with the intention of destroying Ieyasu if any of Hojo's former vassals rebelled against him. Ieyasu followed Hideyoshi's orders and moved to Edo with all his vassals, and after the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, Ieyasu became the real ruler of Japan. He opened the Edo shogunate in 1603 and became the first shogun. He did not move to Kyoto to conduct politics as Hideyoshi did. Ieyasu understood the importance of the land of Edo. Edo, Ieyasu's base of operations, would then become the center of politics. Ieyasu therefore undertook a major construction project in Edo. He cleared mountains and reclaimed the sea to create new waterways and ports. After securing the sea route to transport goods, he built Edo Castle. After 30 years of extensive renovation, Edo Castle became the largest castle in Japan, surpassing Osaka Castle. Ieyasu followed Hideyoshi's policy and further established the status system. During the Warring States period, it was possible for a farmer to become a samurai with his own talent. The greatest success was Hideyoshi Toyotomi, who became the ruler of Japan. He came from a poor peasant background. Ieyasu enforced a system of status based on occupation. This was called samurai, farmers, artisans, and merchants. Samurai were the highest status, followed by farmers, then artisans and merchants. During the Edo period, children of farmers were only allowed to become farmers, while children of merchants were required to become merchants. The shogunate also created a system to control the peasants and townspeople. In this article, I will introduce the system of the townspeople. The town of Edo was left to the autonomy of the townspeople, who had rights as townspeople. Here, townspeople were wealthy citizens who owned their own stores and were obligated to pay taxes. Only they could participate in town government. Under each townspeople were their servants and employees. The shogunate established a system whereby the townspeople were grouped into groups of 5, and if one of them committed a crime, all 5 were held accountable. Thus, the shogunate established a relationship of mutual surveillance and mutual support among the individual townspeople in order to maintain public order and ensure taxation. The lower-class townspeople, who had no rights, were held accountable to the landlord of the tenement in which they lived, and if a resident committed a crime, their landlord was held accountable. Therefore, landlords conducted strict background checks on tenants and guarantors. Thus, in the Edo period, the phrase "a landlord is like a parent, and a tenant is like a child" was born. As explained in the previous commentary, all feudal lords were required to take turns staying in Edo with either themselves or their families every year. This was meant to prevent rebellion. For this reason, many daimyo residences were built in Edo. The daimyo and his attendant vassals lived in these daimyo residences. Ieyasu took many of the townspeople from the Mikawa region, which was his stronghold, to Edo. He also allowed large merchants from other countries to open stores in the city of Edo. In this way, the city of Edo laid the foundation for its development as a political and economic center. In the 1700s, the population of the city of Edo is said to have exceeded 1 million. In 1800, Beijing had 900,000 and London had 860,000. Edo was the largest city in the world at that time. It is said that among these 1 million people, the population of the townspeople was 500,000. And these 500,000 people lived in only 20% of the area of Edo. 60% of the land in Edo was residential land for the samurai, and the remaining 20% was space owned by temples and shrines. Therefore, the townspeople resided in very small spaces. Let us take a look at the setting of their lives here. Townspeople and carpenter chieftains who owned their own stores were official townspeople, with rights as townspeople and the obligation to pay taxes. Townspeople who worked for them, such as employees, were not required to pay taxes and had no rights as townspeople. They lived in an apartment called a tenement. The family lived together in a small room of 8.1 square meters. These were houses for rent, and wealthy townspeople ran the tenements as landlords. As mentioned earlier, the landlord of the tenement was responsible for the dwellers, and the two had a close relationship. The tenements were separated by thin walls, and all the neighbors' voices could be heard. Thus, there was no privacy in tenement living. Each room had a small cooking stove, and toilets and wells were shared. Edo had a complete water supply system, and even some tenements where people of low status lived had running water. Although landlords had the burden of being responsible for their tenants, they had an income to compensate for this. It is the excrement of the dweller. Even before the Edo period, it was known that human excrement was a good source of nutrients for crops, and excrement was a good source of income. As I mentioned earlier, a tenement house is a small room of 8.1 square meters, but since a family lives in this room, there is no room for large luggage or other objects. However, the common people of Edo were not so attached to things. There is a reason for that. This is because fires occurred frequently in Edo. Winters in the Kanto region are especially dry. Fires tend to grow larger. And all buildings are wooden and densely built. It is said that the Great Meiriki Fire of 1657 destroyed 60% of Edo and killed 100,000 people. As a result, the townspeople of Edo had only the bare necessities and did not save money. The common people of Edo were paid on a daily basis, and it was considered chic to spend all their money within the day. This was because even if they hoarded money, they were likely to lose it all in the event of a fire. It is estimated that in the mid-Edo period, there were over 500,000 townspeople living in Edo. The reason for the large number of townspeople living in Edo was the existence of samurai. They came to Edo on the Sankankotai and did not earn any money, but merely consumed it. Their living expenses were covered by the annual tribute from their country. They dropped enormous sums of money into the cities on their way to and from Edo. And Edo, Osaka, and the towns along the highways developed rapidly. The reason why the culture of the common people blossomed during the Edo period is due to the explosive economic development. Who were the bearers of world culture in this period? It was none other than a wealthy few, the aristocracy. However, the standard of living of the common people in Japan was markedly improved by the consumer activities of the samurai. In the early Edo period, Osaka became the economic center of Japan, and Osaka merchants led Japanese culture. From the mid-Edo period onward, the culture of the common people blossomed mainly in Edo. The first cultural leaders of the Edo period were wealthy merchants from Osaka. As cities since ancient times, Kyoto and Osaka had a well-developed commerce. Osaka in particular was a major transportation hub, and rice was brought to Osaka from all over the country. Rice bids were held at the Dojima rice market to determine the price of rice. Incidentally, The world's first futures contract was a rice futures contract on this Dojima rice market. Rice is a staple food in Japan. During the Edo period, the size of each clan was expressed not by the size of its land, but by the amount of rice it produced. During the Edo period, agricultural technology advanced dramatically, and the amount of rice paid as tribute exceeded the amount consumed. All the surplus rice was collected in Osaka, where it could be exchanged for cash. This rice and other products were all collected in Osaka and traded there. In the 1600s, commerce in Edo was still in its infancy and Osaka was the economic center of Japan. By the late 1600s, some Osaka merchants were reaping large profits. Thus, the standard of living of Osaka townspeople improved. People then became more interested in cultural things. This is how the Jinroku culture began, centered in Osaka and Kyoto. The bearers of this Jinroku culture were the townspeople who became wealthy. The Kase culture that would later flourish in Edo was an even more popular culture. Basho Matsuo, the haiku poet, and novelists Saikaku Ihara and Monziman Chikamatsu, who depicted the world of the townspeople, are well known. It was also around this time that kabuki began. In this issue, I have explained the formation of the townspeople of Edo. In the next article, I will explain the composition of farming villages in Edo and the agricultural reforms. If you enjoyed this article, please subscribe to our channel and click the like button.